And hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual presentation with Channel Kindness. It's a collection of stories from resilient young changemakers that prove that kindness not only saves lives, but also builds community. Vroman's Bookstore is the oldest and largest independent bookstore in Southern California. And throughout our long 126-year tenure, we've been proud to work with organizations that strive to better the community and the lives of those around them. So needless to say, we are very excited to be co-hosting tonight's conversation in partnership with the Born This Way Foundation. And before we get started, I'm going to introduce our moderator for tonight. Aisha Mahmoud is a program associate and editor for Born This Way Foundation. Before joining the foundation, Aisha served as a press aide for the Connecticut House Democrats, where she assisted state representatives with press relations and communication outreach. And as a journalist, her work has appeared in the Journal Inquirer, Huffington Post, Her Campus, Nylon, and more. And with that said, if we could bring in Aisha on the screen, that would be great.
Hi, thank you so much, Rara, and thank you so much to Vroman's Bookstore. We're so grateful to co-host this conversation with you, and we're just so grateful. So thank you so much, and I hope after the pandemic, we can all go out and visit in person.
That would be great. That would be lovely.
So thank you so much again, and thank you for everybody that's joining us. As you may already know, Born This Way Foundation was founded to support young people in their mental health and to help them build a kinder and braver world. And we have three main goals at the foundation. The first is to make kindness cool. The second is to validate the emotions of young people everywhere. And the third is to eliminate the stigma surrounding mental health. So today is super exciting because we get to talk about our new book, Channel Kindness. And we actually have three authors today with us. We have Juan Acosta, we have Tyrah, and we have Hana Mangat. And so they will be talking to us about the book. And what's awesome is they each have their own stories about kindness, but yet they're so unique and different. And I think that really goes to show how kindness can be acted upon in different ways. And it also very much reflects our diverse community and our diverse the diversity population that we work with. So I'm super happy to introduce you to our young authors. So here we have them. I'd love for you, Juan, to start, and we'll just go around really quick. And if you can introduce yourselves to our audience using your pronouns and tell us a little bit more about your experience with Channel Kindness.
Great, thank you, Aisha. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Juan Acosta. I use he, him pronouns. You know, being a part of Channel Kindness has been one of the best experiences of my life. Not only did it present me with this platform to tell my story and what I saw within my community, but it connected me with other young change makers like Tyrah, like Hana, and so many more. It has been an honor and beyond what I ever imagined to be able to be a part of this book. And I want to thank Born This Way Foundation for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Juan. And we are always so grateful to have you and to talk with you. And Tyrah, why don't you go next?
Absolutely. Well, Juan, that was a great introduction. My name is Tyrah Majors, and like you said, I am so proud to be a part of Channel Kindness as well. It's been truly an honor to help put this book together and to be a part of such an amazing foundation that really gives our youth a voice to speak in society. A little bit more about myself. I'm a news reporter and also a children's book author. I was fortunate enough to share my story about writing my own book in the Channel Kindness book, but we'll get to that later. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I'm excited for you all to hear what we have to say.
Thank you so much, Tyrah. We always love talking to you too, and your background is always so aesthetic. So thank you for gracing us with that beautiful background. And Hana, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience as well.
Sure. My name is Hana. I use she, hers pronouns. I am currently an undergrad student. I echo everything that Tyrah and Juan said. Channel Kindness is like the gift that keeps on giving. Every time I read a story, it makes me happier. I always talk about like writing the stories for me also was very therapeutic because like stopping to think about the kindness in the world and to write about it was so needed for me, and I think like is something I always want to do more often. And I'm so grateful for the Born This Way Foundation that just continues to amplify the voices of young people and continues to care for its community and its young people. So I'm so happy to be here.
I agree, Hana.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Juan. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Just want to echo that. Really sharing your story is very therapeutic. I know it was helpful for me. So you're right, Hana.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to dive into the power of storytelling and also just empowering yourself to make a difference in the world, which I feel like all of y'all have really, really very much done with such passion and thoughtfulness. So Hana, let's start with you. So you actually co-founded Sick Kid to Kid, which is a youth-run nonprofit organization centered around sick advocacy and intersectional justice. So I'd love to learn what led you to start this organization and how it's influenced your own perception on kindness.
Sure, yeah. I started Sick Kid to Kid in 2012 alongside a lot of other great young people and my mom. We were moved to start the organization after, in August of 2012, there was a shooting at a Wisconsin Sikh Gurdwara or temple. And I think I was very young at the time, and that was kind of the first instance of white supremacy. It was like a self-proclaimed white supremacist who had gone into this Gurdwara and had shot 6 people that were worshiping. And I think for me, that kind of rude awakening to the hatred that exists in the world was very alarming. But even more so, I remember at the time, the media outlets that were covering the shooting were talking about how the white supremacist thought he was killing Muslims. He thought he was going into a mosque. And that was something that didn't sit right with me or my community, because we're not ones to deflect hate. Those aren't the values that we were brought up with. So to me, I think that's when my perception of kindness started to change. So we started this organization, completely youth run, with the guidance of really awesome mentors like my mom. And our goal was to eradicate ignorance of the power of education. So we were working in religious literacy and cultural competency. We started a teacher training program where students would be training their educators to teach about Sikhism in schools, as well as like other religions. And it eventually was approved by the state of Maryland. So teachers were able to get salary advancing credits through the program. But I think all in all, looking back on it, to me, all of those actions were about humanizing my community so that people could see us as human beings in a post 9/11 world, rather than determining what brown skin, a turban, and a beard would mean about someone in terms of their humanity. Like, our goal was to say we're human beings first, regardless of whether we're Sikh, whether we're Muslim. And I think that's what kindness is to me. It's very much so about justice. It's very much so about humanizing the people around you and recognizing everyone's humanity.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you combated an act of hate with an act of love and kindness. And that's how you chose to deal with the situation. And I think, like you said, it's like kindness is advocacy. It's saying to be an activist and amplifying the voices that may not be heard. And Juan, I'd actually love to transition to you, because you did something similar in your story. So I'd love to know why you chose to tell your specific story about bringing awareness and instilling change in your own community in regards to the LGBTQ community and the representation. And I'd also love to know how we can further support the LGBTQ community.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. You know, this story in particular is so personal to me. It is about my journey in drafting a historic LGBTQ plus proclamation for my hometown. When I was growing up in my town, I didn't really have that message of embracement or acceptance. So as I got older, I really wanted to get involved in my community and create the change that I wished I had while I was growing up. I chose to tell this story because it's a reminder that we can start by creating change within our own communities. You know, when we start at home, when we start doing self-reflection, when we go out in our communities and speak up for what we believe in, is when we create that change, and when we inspire others to join us in creating that change. You know, I had to remind myself that having an uncomfortable conversation in public, in this case with the city council, was going to last a couple minutes or maybe an hour. But the feeling of not feeling safe within your own community is not something that only lasts a couple minutes or a couple hours. It is part of our identity as members of the LGBTQ plus community. So ensuring that we have these safe spaces is crucial. And you asked me how we can support the LGBTQ plus community better. And it's by speaking up against any injustice that you see within your community that targets the LGBTQ plus community, maybe even having resources available to the LGBTQ plus community and ensuring that your community is a safe space. We can start by building kinder communities around us. And the Trevor Project, research by the Trevor Project shows that transgender and non-binary youth who reported having their pronouns respected attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not. So really, just even respecting people's pronouns is crucial to really not only validating their existence, but respecting them as beings.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think, like you said, something as simple as just respecting someone's pronouns really goes a long way in how they think about themselves, and that validating themselves and feeling more comfortable in who they are. And we can all be allies, especially right now during this time. And I think the fact that you all just have so powerful stories to tell says so much about how big of change makers you are. It's really quite incredible, because you're all so young and yet you're doing so many powerful, cool things. And just the power of storytelling, I think, really goes a long way. And like Tyrah, you said, you wrote your own children's book. So as we all know, storytelling creates a community of empathy and acceptance, particularly for young people. So Tyrah, how important is it to share our stories and create a space for other young people to learn about our own cultures?
Well, as you just listened to Hana and Juan say, when you share your own stories, you help other people. You speak about culture. That's a strong part of people's lives. And this is how our world is built. We work and live with people who are different than us. And while we are building relationships with these people, it helps to have some perspective and understanding of their culture. And there are lots of ways to learn about culture, not just through the power of storytelling, but in your own communities. Like Hana said, she wanted to educate and kind of change the narrative of the media to help other people understand another culture. So we're all on social media. We watch TV, we read books, we watch movies. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to write a children's book to tell my story. And you can find out more about that in Beyond the Pages in the Channel Kindness book. I wrote about my children's book, Grammy and Me. It's about a young girl spending the day with her great-grandmother. It features a young girl of color, and that's, once again, based on my personal experiences with my great-grandma. I didn't have many stories with characters that looked like me growing up. So that's something I wanted to change. I wanted other young boys and girls to have someone to look up to in the media that they indulge in, because it's not very common. Representation it's very important, not just for young people to see themselves in the literature they read, but for the kids who look like the girl on the front cover of my book, but also for other young children to understand and to know that there are other people that are different than them, but also that may share the same values as them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Representation is so important. And I think the more that you talk to other people in different communities and read about people in different communities from their point of view, the more you feel like you're more aware of the issues around you, the more that you can accept and embrace other cultures. So I think that's so cool that you wrote that story, especially that it came from you and your perspective and your own life. I think that's really awesome. And the fact that it's also about your grandmother is very, very warm and heartfelt. I love that. And while we're kind of talking about embracing other people right now, so we're all kind of going through a difficult time, and we're all striving to make sure that we all stay here. We all want to make sure that young people feel heard, that their emotions are valid, and let them know that they're not alone in this world. So that's why Born This Way Foundation and our partners at Find Your Anchor have created Please Stay as a response to the troubling increase in rates of depression, suicide, and anxiety disorders among young people during this time. So I hope that everyone listening and watching this will take some time to visit pleasestay.us to use our interactive site to identify what's anchoring you during this time. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. So my own anchors are my mom and my dad and my little pup, who is a small little Yorkie and a very old, grumpy old man. So we invite everybody in the comments to take a moment and tell us who your anchor is, and also sign our Please Stay pledge. And I mean, speaking of anchors, who are your anchors in your life? Juan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. Well, like you, my parents, 1,000%, my parents are my anchors, but I just got a puppy. His name is Zeus, and that now I have to look after him. So he's an anchor for sure. And it's just great. My friends, even though they give me headaches at times blowing up my phone, my friends are definitely some of my anchors. How about you, Hannah?
I echo everything. I'm in New York right now for school, so I'm away from my family, which has definitely been hard. But I make them send daily videos of our puppies, so that's been really helpful. My roommates are definitely my anchors, just like fooling around with them all the time. And then also I think like little things like being able to like cook a meal for myself, or like I was telling Aisha this yesterday, like cleaning my room, which I usually don't enjoy, but like now that's been like I think being able to take care of myself and like show up for myself in those ways has been really helpful. What about you, Tyrah?
Yeah, finding an anchor is so important. I wasn't really familiar with the term until this panel, but wow, I have my anchor totally identified, especially during this pandemic. I would have to say my family. Having a support system has always been so important to me. And if you're having trouble deciding what your anchor is or who your anchor is, what I did was I thought of my hobbies, and then I thought of things that I love. I love my family. I go to them for everything. I text my mom, hey mom, what should I wear to work tomorrow? Like the littlest things like that. But my family, I would say, are my anchors. And when it comes to hobbies, it's, taking those little breaks, taking time for the activities I love, relying on TV shows I like to watch, or reading books.
Love the books, love the puppy energy that we have going on right now. Juan, feel free to hop Zeus up whenever you want. Nobody will mind. Anybody is watching has a dog too. We truly do not mind dog pictures. Feel free to send them along. But yes, reading, and I think cleaning, like you said, Hannah, just having like that space that's like nice and like open. Like when you clean your space, you like clean your head a little bit more. Yeah. So I think that's just a great way of taking a deep breath. So while we're on the topic of mental health, I'd love to talk about, how you're all handling your mental health during this time and what kind of resources you're looking to right now. And I think maybe some of those resources could even help some of our audience members. So Hannah, why don't we start with you? Well, how are you taking care of your mental health right now?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the big things for me was like figuring out my patterns. So paying attention to my emotions and like how I'm feeling and when I'm feeling them. Because something I've learned about myself in quarantine is that I tend to get anxious at night and in the mornings. So for me, that means like creating a morning routine and then like a nighttime routine, like putting my screens away, especially because like that triggers a lot of anxiety, especially right now with the way the news goes every day. So being able to put my phone down and say I'm doing yoga before bed, or I'm journaling, and I'm often reading the Channel Kindness book before bed because it makes me happy. And I think the other things are setting boundaries. I think especially for me, COVID wise, like that's been important, but also in general, like being able to say no to work, or no to anything that I don't really feel like I have the capacity to do has been powerful. And lastly, I've like had a new saying where like I think vulnerability is cool, which goes along with like kindness is cool. I think practicing vulnerability right now, especially when so many people are going through such a hard time, like being able to say, yeah, I'm sad today, or I'm happy today, or whatever it is, like talking about it and being candid and vulnerable has been really helpful for me.
And you talked about boundaries a bit, Hannah, and I know Tyrah, with your job being in the news, so how do you also take care of your mental health and exercise those boundaries?
Yeah, when you touched on the news, that really hit home for me. Yeah. So I mentioned, I'm a news reporter full time, so there really is no escaping all the negativity that happens in the world. I wake up to it, I go to bed to it, it's my job, and I always have to be up to date and in tune on what's going on, but self-care is so important, and I really realized that during this pandemic. I also have a routine. I I know it's cliche, but self-care is so important. I unplug as well, disconnect from the screens. I put away my laptop. I put away my phones, especially on the weekend. My work phone, I do not answer it. My work email, I do not answer it, because you can't do that to yourself. And also being in the news, I do want to mention something. We're human too. We report on these issues and we have to have all the facts right and we have to get on TV and talk about it every day, but it affects us as well. And it can be damaging to our mental health. And I'll speak for myself, my mental health. There were a lot of times this summer where I felt sad because of the pandemic or the nationwide protest and civil unrest that we've all seen firsthand. So it affects me too. But I think, again, what Hannah said, taking those breaks, disconnecting, reading a book before bed, FaceTiming your mom or your puppy back home, anything that'll make you smile and just kind of unwind from what's happening in the world. It's so important.
Definitely. And Juan, I'm sure your puppy, just going off of what Tyrah said, anything that makes you smile is one of those things, right?
Yeah, my puppy, my nephew and my niece for sure as well. They bring that just candid joy like early on. And Tyrah and Hannah said it all. Unplugging, setting boundaries for myself was really important as well, particularly as it pertains to work. Just really having that strict boundary of not looking at my email, which was really hard to do for a while, but it must be done in order for we could feel better. Self-care is important, and we can't focus on helping other people if we're not taking care of what's within. And I think that's really important. It took me a while to really hold myself accountable for that, but now I know, now I'm working on it and we're getting better. So that's good.
I'm with all of you there. Yeah, what were you going to say, Tyrah?
I was just going to add, you don't have to say yes to everything. I think Hannah and Juan both touched on that. But I, myself, with work, with friends, I felt like I always had to be a part of everything. Say yes to going out. Say yes to taking another story. Because one, I'm probably a little overambitious. And two, I have FOMO, fear of missing out. I always want to be a part of whatever party's happening or something. But I found out, you can't say yes to everything. You can't be available to everyone. So say no. Don't be afraid to say no.
Yeah, I would also just echo, I feel that. And I thought once we were in quarantine, I was like, oh, that's going to change. Like, I can't go anywhere. But then saying no to virtual stuff is also equally as important. I would then just I'd be sitting in this chair all day, on Zoom, and it's also important to say no to Zoom. So I would add that.
Oh, 100%. Definitely saying no to things. And as Tyrah said, I have major FOMO as well when I don't do something, or I'm just like, I should have just done it, right? Right after. But it is important to say no and to assert those boundaries with yourself and hold yourself accountable.
Definitely. Yeah. You have to put yourself first. And right now during this pandemic, you have to put your health and safety first. And I think that's so important that each of y'all touched on that because we all live very different lives, yet our self-care and our mental health is so important and very much worth taking care of. So thank you all for sharing those ways that you cope right now with us. And I've also I think the Born This Way self-care tips was here before, the link before, and I know that's in the chat. So thank you so much for bringing that up again. And if anybody needs some self-care tips, you can check out the below. And I'd also like to offer BeThere.org as a resource. It's a great way to learn how to have those conversations about mental health with your friends, family, or loved ones. And I think we all need to be talking about our mental health and really just checking in with each other right now and being honest about that as well. And are there any mental health resources that y'all would like to touch on? That's totally fine. But if there's any particularly that come to mind, or any particular things that any particular resources that you turn to?
Yeah, for me, in my case, I'm the assistant manager for the California Warm Line. So I didn't even know what a warm line was prior to getting a position there. And I have really seen the benefits people get from calling a warm line, just getting someone to listen to you. We think at times that everybody has someone at home that can hear them out to talk about things that are impacting their mental health. But unfortunately, it's not like that for every household. So it's important to have resources like a warm line, a crisis text line, just somewhere someone could go and receive that support in that moment. And those are some resources that I tend to like to utilize or to offer to others.
And Juan, what is exactly a warm line for anybody that may not know?
Yeah, so a warm line, it's aiming to be a preventative measure rather than a hotline. A warm line is where people could call before the crisis. And, oftentimes in the mental health system as a whole, people don't receive support or help until they're in a crisis. So we need more preventative resources. We know that. So the warm line aims to serve as a preventative resource prior to the crisis and to get people connected with someone to hear them out, as well as connected with resources.
Thank you. Yeah. And Hannah or Tyrah, do you have any resources? And if not, how would you talk to a friend right now about their mental health or your mental health? How do you do that?
Right. I think I would plug the Happiness Lab. I actually just thought of this. It's on Spotify. It's a podcast. And I think that's been really helpful for me because it's, I think, like a neuroscientist that talks about helps you understand why you feel the way you feel sometimes and gives you tips. So that's where I learned that a morning routine and a nighttime routine makes a big difference for me. And they also talk about when you're speaking to yourself, sometimes it's easier if you use the third person to give yourself a pep talk because you're more likely to believe it. So it's all science-based tips that help you improve your mental health. And I found that really important. And I also, I've been a big meditation, yoga, journaling, type person lately, and I think that's been so helpful for me.
To add on to that, I also journal nearly every week, not every day, but reflecting, what goes on through your day, what goes on through your week. Sometimes it just helps to get everything that's in your mind just on paper. It's really a good release. And also a couple people in the comments are offering some great resources too. Masterclass.
Yeah.
Wrote about Masterclass in the comments, and that is a great place to really escape from the real world, and also chatting with others on the phone. I think it goes back to your anchors. Who are your anchors? Speaking with my family every day is definitely a good mental health release.
So I feel old. What is Masterclass? Is it just where you take a lot of classes for anything you hobbies, or?
If it's the same thing that this person in the comments is talking about, Masterclass, as I know it, is Oprah's podcast, and she brings on an inspiration.
Oh my God, that's embarrassing that I don't know that.
I don't know.
It's fair. I don't think it's that old. I think it's fairly new, maybe a year or two. I'm not sure, but
I think they also have YouTube
video ones. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the expert in each field will teach you. I always get the advertisement for the one with Steph Curry will teach you how to shoot a so it's things like that, but they have really cool classes. Yeah.
I get the RuPaul one. So
there's many master classes, great resources, love them all.
I have to check that out. And again, very embarrassing that I do not know that, but thank you for making me already cooler. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for educating me on about that. So we have some questions that we want to ask y'all, and I invite anybody in the comments to ask our panelists questions as well. So Tyrah, let's start with you. A question that we have received for you is that I admire how you're brave enough to share your story and publish your own book. What would you say to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps in the sense of they want to share their own story as well?
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. My advice to you would be to think about what your story is and what you want to tell. If you're hesitant or nervous about it, talk it out with someone you trust. That's definitely where I started. I started writing the pages of Grammy and Me in my journal in math class one day. Probably not the best advice. I should have been paying attention, but I was writing about my great-grandmother during math class one day. And it didn't necessarily sound like a children's book at first, but I read it to my family, once again, my anchors, and they said, this is great. This sounds like a children's book. You should pursue it. So talk it out with someone you trust. Also think about who you want to tell your story to. Who is your audience? Don't just tell your story for yourself. I mean, you can. It's definitely therapeutic. But also, you may be helping someone out, or someone may need to hear your story to help them get through or to understand something. So definitely think about who your audience is. Go to someone you trust. And also, if you want to write a book specifically, do research, ask the people around you before you go to Google and look up how to write a book. Look at your network. I went to my college professors. I wrote Grammy my sophomore year in college, and I went to my English professor and I said, hey, I'm writing a book. Like, can you edit it? And she did it for me, and it was awesome. So my biggest advice is definitely develop your network if you want to publish a book or something. Your network can be someone as simple as your classmates. I know most of you are doing online school right now, so introduce yourself to your Zoom classmates, message them on Facebook or email, and introduce yourself, because your classmates are going to be your future network. Your colleagues are going to be your future network. And also think about how you want to tell your story. Maybe it's not a book. Maybe you want to write a blog or share a Twitter thread. I know Juan is so good about using social media and sharing his story on all platforms. I see your stuff on LinkedIn all the time. Think about the platform, whether it's recording a YouTube video maybe, or writing a book. So know the platform and decide what is best. And I do have some resources to share as well if anyone has questions about book writing. I'm a part of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. That's a really good resource. I believe you do have to be a member, but there are free resources on their website as well. And they really guide you through the steps on writing, publishing, illustrating. Also, specifically for children's books, Journey to Kidlit, they share tips on writing and publishing as well. Also, they have a variety of websites dedicated solely to children's book authors.
Thank you so much, Tyrah. And I think everything you said just goes to show that we all have a story to tell. And you're never too young to write that story. It's whatever you feel. It is whatever, what is valid and true to you. And as long as you're staying true to yourself, it cannot be wrong. I'd also just love to add in the resources of writers of color and POC in publishing. And coming from a writing background myself, that's been two very important resources for me as a woman of color. So I think those are just incredible resources that you shared. So thank you so much. And going to Hana now. So we have a question that says, I want to start my own nonprofit organization, but I don't know where to start. What are some tips for someone who wants to start their own nonprofit or a school initiative?
Yeah. My overall advice is always just go for it. I think my more specific advice is one, see what's out there. This is what one of my stories in the Channel Kindness book is about. There's a lot of great work being done in the world. And sometimes it's important to sit down and do your research, kind of like Tyrah was saying, and see what's out there and see if maybe you don't have to start your own thing, but you can help someone else or fill a gap, fill a need within another organization that maybe isn't maximizing its potential the way it could be. I also think something that's very important to me, and I would highly suggest, is center the most marginalized, center the community that's going to be impacted by the work. So if you're working in schools, center young people, and center the most marginalized young people as well, because those are the stories that aren't told. And those are the stories that I personally think our world needs to hear more. And lastly, stay passionate, keep your reasons for wanting to do what you're doing close to you, because I think especially in nonprofit work, it's draining, it's hard. People say no a lot, but you make them say yes, right? Keep those reasons close to you and keep people around you that help you, that remind you why you're doing what you're doing.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that passion is seen in all of you with the way that you have started your own initiative or your own book, Tyrah, or your own nonprofit, Hana, or you, Juan, with your story about pride and the LGBTQ community in Woodland, California. So I think that's just so incredibly important. Passion is such a very important thing to have before starting any project. So thank you so much, Hana. And Juan, to you, a question from our audience. My friend recently came out. How can I reach out and let them know that I'm there for them?
Great question. And, there's no perfect way to reach out. I'd really just encourage you to build a safe space and have a purposeful conversation. Maybe have some resources available for you to offer to your friend and just let them know that you're there for them. Meet them where they're at and respect their boundaries if they don't want to disclose everything. Just, try and be there in that moment for them and meet them where they're at and try to really emphasize that you're there to support them and that they're not alone and that they don't have to go through this alone by not having any support group. Even offering, as I said, resources like the Trevor Project, Trans Lifeline, or other resources that might be beneficial to them. Because sometimes when you're in that specific situation, you don't want to disclose a lot of information to your loved ones. Maybe just reaching out to other people is really beneficial in that moment.
Yeah, and I think to reinforce what you said, just the act of listening, and you're listening to listen, not listening to respond. So I think just what you're saying, just being there is one of the kindest things that you can do. And I'd love to just wrap this up with messages of hope, and which is something that we always focus on. And so I'd love to know from each of you, what's giving you hope right now, and where are you finding joy? So Juan, since you answered last, let's go with you.
Okay. I mean, I find hope really just in my nephew and my niece, as I see them just grow up with so much joy, because they're so innocent, right? And I am like tasked with a lot of pressure and stress at times. So just seeing them gives me a lot of hope, but also seeing all the young people stepping up in this moment and really leading in this moment. You know, oftentimes people, for some reason, automatically think as leaders, as older people, which they are, but young people are leading today as well. And it's shown all throughout social media. I see people offering resources to each other. I see people speaking up about very important topics regarding equity in this country and in their communities. And that really brings hope to me.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And Tyrah, what about you? What's bringing you hope right now?
That's a great point. I guess you would call them Gen Z. I don't know, but the young people out here are really doing a great job of spreading awareness, getting the message out there, whatever it is you believe in. I just joined TikTok. I feel old now, but I'm learning TikTok, and that is literally the spot to be educated, and that's the young people who are on there. I mean, shout out to my little sister, Victoria. She's one of those change makers. So props to you all. You're doing great. It definitely brings me joy to see you all and all of your efforts, because you truly are the future. And what else brings me joy? I think just, taking those little breaks, the mental health breaks we talked about. We're in a rough time right now with the pandemic. Who would have thought? But taking time to do the things I like, journal or sketch in my notepad or read, going back to my anchors once again, but just doing things that make me happy. It's really the little things in life.
Yeah, and I love actually how you mentioned TikTok, because one, I remember watching a video on your TikTok, like you posted to Instagram, and I was like, this is really funny and really cool. So like, just shout out there. But also I, with like the little ones in my life, or not the little ones, but like anyone in like middle school and high school right now, where I feel like there's a lot of group dancing, and dancing is really fun way to like blow off steam or just take care of your mental health, and just trying all these new dances is such a cool thing to do, and it's fun. So I would definitely also recommend TikTok as a resource for your mental health.
Sure.
And Hana, what's bringing you hope right now, and what are the little joys?
I think like just as Juan and Tyrah were speaking, I was thinking that like, as whack of a year as 2020 has been, like, I think what it's taught me is that like, where there's pain, there's often resilience. And I don't say that to glorify pain in any way, but I mean, like, that's what I've been seeing, that like, in a time when like our world is hurting in like so many different ways, like there are still people coming together. There are still people who are serving others. Like I think of like my mom has been volunteering in a COVID hospital since March, and she does it with like a smile on her face, right? Like the fact that like that's how like people are showing up for each other right now, that like we get to sit here and talk about kindness right now, like those things, I think gratitude is honestly what it is like being able to recognize that like I have a lot of good in my life, and like I'm so happy about that. And even in the darkest times that we're living in, like I can still find that good.
I love that quote of when there's pain, like where there's pain, there's resilience. And again, not to glorify pain, but like to see how people have come together and helped each other in such a really troubling and challenging time and in the world right now is really encouraging and empowering. So thank you for that, Hana. And I think it's also really important to note that, like you've all said, generations that, your generation, generations after us, they're just so extremely passionate and powerful. And you see it right now when, the election's coming up, and we're all kind of just pushing people to vote and use their voice and amplify what they have to say, because every vote matters and every voice is important. So this was also just my reminder for everyone to vote. And that's all for tonight. But I do want to reiterate Ryan's comments saying that, like, so impressed with all of y'all, and we're all gonna be okay. Everyone's gonna be okay. And thank you so much for bringing hope to us. So thanks everyone for joining in and tuning in for this evening. Thank you to Vroman's Bookstore for co-hosting this conversation, and to our Channel Kindness authors for sharing your stories and inspiring all of us to create a kinder and braver world. And you can also pick up Channel Kindness at Vroman's Bookstores and channelkindness.org/book for more information. And also, if you or someone you know has a Channel Kindness story for us, please feel free to submit it and share your story with us at channelkindness.org. So thank you all so much. We hope you stay brave, be kind, and have a good night.
Thank you.